Welcome to the Osogovo YouTube channel. My name is Sam, back again on Sam Gale Talks. In this episode, I am joined by a man who helped Grimsby go to League Two and has played for other teams, also including Mansfield, Boston Town, and is now a manager. I am joined by Nathan Arnold. Nathan, thank you for coming on.
You're very welcome, Sam. Good to meet you, mate.
Just how has isolation been for yourself and your family? Obviously, it's difficult being a manager now. But
Yeah, to be honest, I'm a little bit of an introvert, so my business with NAC, Nathan Arnold Coaching, allows me to work from home. So
Brilliant.
Not too much has been affected professionally. Obviously, with football and the managing, like you say, our season ended. It was null and void. We was actually in the playoff. Well, we was actually in the promotion spot, so
Yeah.
we would have been promoted this season, and obviously it's been cancelled. So that was a bit frustrating. But apart from that, it's allowed me to spend good quality time with family.
Yeah.
Some amazing things happening during lockdown. I know that some people find it difficult with their mental health and well-being, adjusting to the slower pace of life. But for me and myself, it's been amazing really to just reconnect with people. There's so many people that
Absolutely.
I've reached out to, old friends from school, not spoken to them for over 10 years. I was going through my social media yesterday and just making sure that if I'd missed anyone's message from months ago or years ago, I'd go and reconnect with them. And when I was actually asking how they're doing, I found that they'd messaged me and I'd not replied. It was just a reflection of how busy I used to be in the real world with football and everything else going on. So it's allowed me really just to slow down and reconnect with those people, which has been great.
Although obviously this isolation is obviously difficult, it seems like some people are obviously reaping the rewards of actually having the time, like you say, just to sit down, take stock of everything, and not have to think about anything else. And that seems like you're having.
Well, people are almost backed in a corner to do that, because you're not allowed to go out. And, I think it encourages people to really just slow down. I think when I look at society on a whole, I think people run around with spending 80 hours a week with their head chopped off, trying to prove themselves or trying to provide for their families. And I see it as like this conveyor belt that people are on. If you can just step off it now and again and just self-reflect, and spend time with family and on yourself as well. I always say it's a full-time job getting to know yourself. So that's really important to find some self-care. And I think people have got the opportunity to do that now.
Just to obviously reiterate what you said. You said sort of giving yourself self-care and sort of discovering yourself is a full-time job. Do you feel like you got that when you were playing football?
Not until the later stages. I say 27. Something happened in my personal life, which is well documented. I've sort of shared my journey publicly, openly speaking about the loss of my mother in 2015, how sort of that affected me mentally and emotionally, and sort of going through the secret storm off the pitch, but on the pitch highly successful, and it happened at the most successful period of my career actually. And by giving myself permission to slow down and start to do the things that I love to do really helped with my well-being and mental health. And it's very difficult, of course, because you're in such a masculine environment, where you have to be a lad and sort of wear this mask. But I took the mask off. I gave myself permission to do that, and got some foreign looks from my teammates and other people within football. But for me, it was all about discovering who I was, and actually took me a little while to figure that out.
Do you feel like sort of nowadays they're bringing in these initiatives with the mental health? Do you feel like these are absolutely key to helping players with their sort of careers? Obviously, with some people, they say it's half of the problem is the mental side of it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're three-part beings. I say to my old teammates whenever I speak to them, it's mind, body, and spirit. It's like we sometimes only operate from the physical elements to it, and pumping weights and getting conditioned for football. But then mentally, it's a roller coaster. One week you're in the team, the next week you're out the team. People who I know personally who's had serious injuries where that's changed the course of their career or life. So you have to be. I don't like to use the term you have to be thick-skinned, but unfortunately, in that kind of world and environment, you do, and you have to make sure that you're well equipped and well prepared for that. Otherwise, football can swallow you up mentally. So yeah, it's about alignment. Really, it's about making sure that you're not just going out and lifting the weights and physically attending those areas. It's all about mentally and emotionally being available as well, because it is such an emotional game, and you're right, there is work. People are implementing this kind of stuff into sports, and a lot more high-profile footballers are talking about mental health. I've seen an amazing series on Sky Sports with Paul Merson talking about his addiction with alcohol, and it's just for high-profile players to be able to open up and speak about it live on Sky Sports now, something that wouldn't even be thought of 2 or 3 years ago.
Like with obviously my sort of era of football, I've sort of grown up and it's obviously just come in. But for the generations before me, it almost seemed to like you say, you're going full speed ahead. You don't really think about much, and then like with Paul Merson, it sort of all sort of came tumbling down, and that can really destroy a player, can't it?
Yeah, definitely. A lot's changed. I mean, my initiation growing up, I was last a millennial, so it was probably at the last final stages really where they brought safeguarding in and all of that. But my youth team days, we had it pretty rough. We got a few digs off the first team players, and there was a few things that happened, behind closed doors that you probably couldn't get away with these days. But that built our character, that built our personality, that brought us on in terms of going from a boy to a man really quick. We had to grow up really fast, and I think you're living in a world today where the game's changed. There's I used to watch old matches come on TV now and again, and what would be probably a 6-month ban now wouldn't even get a yellow card back in the day. So it's a lot's changed, and I'm not saying it's a soft generation now, but we are protected. The game is protected. Yeah. With VAR and certain decisions, not leaving the ground and stuff like that. So a lot's changed, and in that you have to adapt because the games and the rules change. So you have to adapt as a player. So alongside that is, it can adopt a little bit of softness in terms of mindset and mentality. And I think, you see players today rolling around on the floor and all of that stuff. And I can see why Roy Keane sat up in the press box.
What are you doing?
Yeah, sort of getting frustrated with how the game's gone. And that sort of leads into society as well. And we've got to be really careful that even though it's amazing that people are actually coming out and speaking about, mental health, that it doesn't soften us up too much, that we just label everything. I'm all about building that resilience up to be able to be well equipped for difficult and challenging times, rather than using people and services as a crutch, because
Absolutely.
All that's going to do is just keep you in victim consciousness. It's about taking accountability to pull yourself out of that situation. And you're right, there's so much help now, which is fantastic for people.
Absolutely. I'll move on to your career. Obviously, starting off with Mansfield in the youth team. Can you remember sort of what it was like in your first couple of games? Obviously, it must be very daunting as a youth player coming into the first team. Like you say, little things that may have used to have happened doesn't happen now. But did that obviously shape you as a player? And what was your debut and the couple of games after that like?
Yeah, sure. So a little backstory. I was 16, left school, and you sort of go in to see if you're going to get kept on or released. And I've been with Mansfield from the age of 10. So for 6 years, I've made it through every year, every stage. And I actually went into the office and sat with my nan in there, and the coaches looked at me, and all the scholarships had already been handed out. So I kind of got the pattern that, people was going to get released who was brought in later on. And I was one of those at the later stages. And, they said to me, I don't think you're going to develop in time, don't think you're going to grow. Of course, I was light then. I wasn't developed fully to be able to withstand, men's football, certainly. And I had probably 2 or 3 years in the youth team to then develop in time. And they didn't see that it was possible for me. And they actually let me go until I got, 100 yards to the car park down the road. And one of the coaches chased after me and said, "We've made a mistake. We'd like to give you a sponsorship." At the time, I've never heard of a sponsorship. It was either you get a scholarship or you don't. Yeah. And a sponsorship, they said to me, if you go out and find somebody to sponsor you, then you can come onto the program. So obviously, it was a second chance for me. I went and got a sponsorship, and there was actually me and one other guy that got a sponsorship deal to get onto the scholarship program. We was the only 2 players that went on to play for the first team. So it was quite interesting.
Who was that other player, if you don't mind me asking?
His name was Danny Sleeth. I mean, he played at Boston and Nuneaton and a few non-league teams, but he never really went on to fulfil his potential. But it was interesting because we was the only 2 on sponsorship, so we was almost down the other end of the pecking order. But then we was the only ones that actually progressed into the first team. And then touching on how my debut came about, basically my youth team coach Paul Holland, we used to call him Dutch at the time. He was in the youth team with David Beckham. He played for the 21s with David Beckham. But then he got a bad injury, so then he ended up becoming a really good coach, and he was my first youth team coach. Actually, the guy who pulled me back in the car park and gave me a chance. And he sort of, at the time of my debut, he became assistant manager. And Peter Shirtliff was the manager at the time, and he managed to twist Peter Shirtliff's arm. So I'd arrived in for the game thinking that I was going to be on the bench, my first time on the bench for the first team, and then he pulls me into the office, about an hour and a half before kickoff, and says, throw a curveball in there and said you're playing. So I made my debut against Hereford in the cup, and he always said to me, always prepare, because it's better for you to prepare and not have an opportunity than to have an opportunity and not be prepared. So he was always saying, you never know when you're going to get a chance. And of course, it's not easy because you kind of see there's a long way to go to get to the first team. The bridge is quite long. So he was right. He chucked me straight in the deep end and made my debut at 17.
So do you feel like he was the man that put sort of his arm around you and was like, if you sort of take my advice, you could go a long way?
Yeah, well, you see, he's seen something in me that maybe I didn't see in myself. He believed in me, and I had 2 other people in my life. When I look back and reflect, there was 2 other people. One guy, how I started with football from the beginning. I was 9 years old, and I was playing in the street. And this Ford Mondeo came past, wound the window down. This guy said, "I drive." He said, "Hey son, what's your name?" I said, "Nathan." He said, "I drive past here every night, and I see you playing football by yourself." He was like, "Are you into football?" I said, "Yeah." He said he'd go play for a team. I said, "No." He said, "Well, could you go and get your guardian for me?" I went in the house, and my mum and nan came out, and he said, "We'd like to invite him for a trial at Mansfield Town." This guy was a coach at Mansfield, but he's also done a lot of work in the community. And my mum straight away said, because we didn't have much growing up in terms of money, and my mum said, it's a great gesture, but I'm sorry, we won't be able to take him to and from football. We don't drive. And I can remember him saying to me and my mum, "If you meet me at the bottom of the street this time next week. I will take him myself to training, and I'll also pay for his costs too, and I'll drop him home. And he stuck to his word. The following week, he did that and got me in for a trial. And I spent 11 years, the next 11 years at Mansfield Town. So there's a few people that was significant to get me to where I got to. And going back to Paul Holland, my youth team coach, he's seen something in me potential-wise, and he stuck by me, and I knew I had that safety net there. If I didn't perform well in the first team, then I always had the reserve football to fall back on and then go again, and get second win. So, I thank a lot of people to get me to where I was and give me that leverage into the first team.
Do you feel like with the youth team, or sort of, was it more so the youth team, or was it the 67 games you played for Mansfield in the first team? Were they your formative years in terms of the most sort of growing up you did, or was it more towards the end of your career?
I'd say it was after I left Mansfield, you see, because that environment, I was comfortable. I was there for 11 years from the age of 10. I knew my way around the stadium, the pitch. I knew my way around the town. I was born there. So I was kind of, at 21 when I left, I was kind of comfortable out. I was ready for a new challenge. And I'd say it wasn't until my next club, Alfreton, where I spent 2 or 3 seasons, where I really grew up. There was a manager called Nicky Law, and he was a bit like Marmite. You either love him or hate him. And I didn't kind of enjoy my first 6 months there because his approach, I wasn't used to it. But then, when I left, he was the one that really took my career and took my performances to another level. And, from there I got signed by Cambridge, who was a league above. And, for me, that period at Alfreton was a really important stage, because not only did I fly the nest from Mansfield, I was also then probably playing more week in, week out. And even though Alfreton wasn't as the club wasn't as big as Mansfield at the time, it allowed me to then just find who I was, find my feet, play regularly, and then from there, obviously things started to move quite fast for me.
You obviously touched upon Nicky Law with your first 6 months, obviously not enjoying it. What was his approach like? Was it more of a hard? How do you put it?
Well,
hard-skinned approach.
He'd tell you how it is, and I was so used to having good people around me who would tell me what I want to hear or bide me time if I didn't play well. I had to grow up really quick with Nicky, because he was the one that removed all excuses, and players can find any excuse, why they didn't probably perform, or why they played for training, or whatever it was. And Nicky just was black and white. He was straight down the middle, and I needed that. I needed that honesty, and actually it was painful. It was uncomfortable, because I had to then look at my own performances and take accountability. And like I say, because I was at Mansfield for 11 years, I knew everybody. It was comfortable. Moving to Alfreton, stepping away from all of that, allowed me to then, grow into my own. And I've got Nicky to thank, because I always say to my daughter, you might not like me now, but you're going to love me later, because there's some things that you need to hear, to help you grow. And some of the things that he was telling me wasn't really landing or resonating, because I didn't want to hear it. But then looking back in hindsight, it was such a valuable time for me in my development.
Do you think that's the reason why Cambridge took you? Because Nicky Law sort of said, fix up, or sort of you won't get where you want to be ultimately.
Yeah, Nicky, it was really weird, because he's at Burnley now. He's working with Sean Dyche, but similar kind of strategy in terms of and playing style. It was high intensity. in your face, competitive. And I was this slight winger, quick, nimble, wasn't very attritional, didn't really tackle. So I was kind of given a free license, if you like, in a team that was very physical, a bit like Burnley-like, and I had this free role on the left. And Nicky knew that, I had potential to be a match winner. So he swallowed all the nasty side of the game that I didn't have, and he sort of just worked on me and what I could bring effectively up at the top end of the pitch. So Nicky identified straight away that he ain't going to instill that in me so soon, and just worked on my strengths. And I think that really helped me be more effective in my wing play. And off the back of that, then got my move to Cambridge. And Nicky always said, if someone comes in for you higher, I'll drive you there myself. And to be fair to him, he never stopped. He never got in my way. He told me Cambridge came in, and he wished me all the best. So that was obviously good of him as a manager to do.
That's huge for a manager to say, look, although my sort of way of it is physical, and conference probably was going to be physical anyway, because if my personal outlook on it is the lower you go, the more physical it is, the more technical it obviously is, higher leagues. But
you got it.
It's huge for a manager to go, although it's physical, we'll work on your strengths and we'll make your strength like the main point of obviously where we're trying to go, as opposed to going, you're not going to cut it here just because you haven't got what we need.
Yeah, exactly that. And and in the best managers can identify that, know what they've got. I mean, look at Sir Alex Ferguson, the most successful manager over the last decade, what he achieved. And I can remember a story about here, I think it was actually on Match of the Day a couple of Saturdays ago with Gary Lineker and Ian Wright, and was talking about managers, and he was saying about how the players used to say, well, how come Eric Cantona can wear jeans and a shirt and we have to wear, a suit or a tracksuit? Why is he different? And Sir Alex Ferguson just had that knack of being able to handle and manage players individually to get the best out of them. And Nicky was the same. He identified my strengths. He identified how he could use me as being an effective way of, at the top end of the pitch to win us games of football. And I was grateful for that, because it like you say, non-league is tough. You have to get your tin helmet on and go to the trenches. And it's attritional, like I say. So it's definitely helped me in terms of bulking up, and I had to bulk up, I had to get in the gym, I had to get on a program, and all of that to withstand the physicality of it. But then I think it's seeing that I had the ability to go higher, but without the actual strength and conditioning to go with it, then I'd obviously go to a certain level.
Has Nicky Law and these other managers you've obviously have they shaped you as a coach, or have you sort of gone, I've seen their approach and I'm gonna take little bits and sort of bring it all together?
Yeah, definitely. So I think what I tended to do was, whenever I've had a manager, especially as I got older and matured, was to get a notepad and sort of just soak them up like a sponge and sit at the back and take notes. And I've kept the notes still to this day, and I'm glad I have, because obviously going into coaching and management, I can reflect back on them notes, and it's almost using your own human experiences, then remixing it with other people's, and taking what was effective and taking out the things that was ineffective, and sort of then it fast tracks you. I'm 32 and been managing for 18 months, so it's like, although I can still play and I still love the game and I'm still joining in training and stuff like that, the wealth of knowledge that I took from my managers along the way, and my mum always used to say, learn from other people's mistakes, you can't make them all yourself. So learning from their mistakes, like if you don't write it down in a journal, and I'm sure you use the journal in any way with what you do, it's a fantastic tool to reflect and go back and actually say, look, I've got all this knowledge now to apply to my current situation. And exactly that. But obviously we'll probably move on to the Cowleys at Lincoln, but they was probably in terms of tactically and man management wise, they was probably the best managers that I've worked under.
Absolutely. Obviously, we'll move into, if it's not a career highlight, it's definitely up there. Grimsby at Wembley, obviously scoring the 94th minute winner. What was that day like? Because it's a completely different situation to obviously playing at home or away at the holy grail of English football, really.
Yeah, well, I'd say the week leading up to the final, because we scraped through the semi-final second leg in extra time against Braintree, who was managed by the Cowlers at the time, and that was part-time.
Oh, wow.
So they punched above their weight, and they actually gave us 2 good games, and we managed to scrape by, and then we actually got to the final. Say for that week leading up to the final, playing at Wembley is the best thing in the world as a footballer. And I sort of went to bed every night and sort of dreamt of 5 or 6 different scenarios how the game's going to pan out. And so I'd already played the game 6 times before the actual final came in my head. So actually, when we got to the final and we actually got to the ground and walked onto the pitch, I actually felt exhausted, because I'd lived it already in my head all week. So it's quite weird. And then I can remember thinking, gosh, like, compose yourself, gather yourself. I felt a bit fatigued and all of that. And you're just running on adrenaline. You come out, we had the home dressing room, you look to your left and you just see a sea of black and white, 15,000. These people that I'm in the community. I'm a people's person, always have been as a footballer. I love to get into wherever I play, I get into the community and get to know people. And when I see familiar faces, it makes the hair stand on the back of your neck, knowing that you're in a position right now to be able to impact and affect them and their lives. It means so much to them. And that was an amazing thing as a footballer, walking out Wembley, knowing that you can put smiles on faces, and you can end up changing the cook's life and the cleaner's life. Their wages goes up as well. If you get promoted, it affects everybody. So it's a great time.
I've been in non-league in terms of like media, and like you say, changing people's lives. Obviously, the more you go down the sort of footballing league ladder, you find that like you come into contact with more people, and it really, like, some people it's their livelihoods that go. That final is literally their be all and end all, and to go and win it for them is just second to none, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, there's a saying, I've got it here actually. It says, a man's 1 year of work is a lifetime of memories for a supporter.
Absolutely.
You could have one good season, and they're going to have a memory for life. So I always say to footballers, I say to my lads, just sacrifice for 1 year. See what you can achieve. See what's possible. Maximise your full potential. I say to my lads at Melton, they're step 6. They've got full-time jobs. They play football because they love playing. It's a hobby. But I said, what if you, at 22 years old, takes the knowledge that I pour into you with the coaching and the experience, and you actually sacrifice a year of your life, eating right, living right? Who knows how far you can go? And at that level, it's so easy to just drift by because, they think that they've missed the boat and they're never going to get to those heights. But, a lot of players, instead of waving the white flag and surrendering to that because it's a limited belief, I always encourage them to just sacrifice and dedicate and commit yourself just for 1 year. And if it don't work after a year, at least you can look at yourself in the mirror and tell your grandkids, you know what, I had a really good go. But the worst thing to do is get to the nursing home at 85 years old and you look back on your life and say, gosh, I wish I took the courage, and I wish I sacrificed this, that and the other to have a really good go. So that's what I always say to people, and I love that quote because one year of work can change somebody's life,
Absolutely.
and a lifetime memory.
Yeah.
So
you look at for players in sort of your team should be looking up at the players that are at the very top. If you look at the the Jamie Vardys. More so, I look at. I'm a Watford fan, so Troy Deeney. He was a bricklayer, and now he was in the FA Cup final. Anything's obviously possible as a player.
Yeah,
and
Andre as well.
Yeah, Andre as well. Obviously, he went from Luton and all the way up. He was with Burnley as well.
He was a non-league. Yeah, he was at non-league before Luton. Yeah, he was non-league as well. So yeah, I mean, there's some, like you say, there's some inspirational stories there. It just shows you what's possible. It's like Roger Bannister, the 4-minute mile. No one thought that it was possible for a human being to run a mile in 4 minutes. Roger Bannister came along and broke that record, and then 10,000, even including high school kids, went on to break that record. And it only takes one person to pave the way and show it's possible to inspire others to do that. And you're right. I mean, those players, it's difficult because a lot of players at Step 6 and my boys haven't really had an education. They've not come through the youth system or Centre of Excellence or academies. They've sort of fell into that level, and the ability alone's got them there. But then there's a lot of education that goes in, not just playing football, but a lot of education, with good coaches at 10, 11, 12, 13. I have parents come to me and say, Nath, I've got a 10-year-old son. What's the best route to go down? Does he play on a Saturday with his friends, or does he go to an academy? He's got the opportunity to go into academy. And it's a difficult one because I love playing with my friends, and there's that fun element. And, you've got to be careful at that age as well because they're still young. But then if you can get into an academy, you've got so much wealth of knowledge from the coaches that it's going to help you later on for your career. So the hardest thing for my boys is that they haven't had that education. But, it's still try and go back to my coach, try and see the potential in someone and then get them to see it for themselves.
Because again, like we were sort of obviously talking about at the start, it literally could just come down to mindset again. A little click in mindset just could change a player from being an alright player to an amazing player.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. I mean, the difference, I'd say, between someone in the Championship or someone like Jamie Vardy to somebody like one of my forwards is that he had self-belief. You look at Vardy, he's
got an arrogance about him.
He's got an arrogance about him that it doesn't matter who he comes up against.
Yeah.
He's himself and he's got that arrogance, And I think that is the difference, like I say, with mentality and mindset. And mindset's everything because, if you don't believe in yourself or you don't know how to use your personality to get the best out of you, then you can just fall by the wayside, and you see so many players do that.
The more players I've seen, obviously sometimes it's not great to be arrogant, but the more players I've seen that play like with Troy Deeney, when he come out of jail, obviously Zola spoke to him and said, there's 7 strikers in front of you, and Deeney just laughed at him and he went, did I say something wrong? And he goes, no, I'm going to be your first striker by the end. And that can just set a player off, can't it?
Yeah, exactly. And self-belief's everything. You need to believe in yourself, believe that it's possible. And I think the mentality of a player, like I say, you can do all the strength and conditioning, and you can do all the recovery work in the pool. You can have all the latest resources and stuff like that. But what's going on up here? Who's helping you understand how your patterns are and sort of your mindset, working on your mindset, building that resilience, building that self-esteem, building that self-belief. And I think that is probably lacking in football, to be honest, to have someone who can actually go into a football club and help with someone mentally. But you see, I do think you sort of got it or you haven't. And I had a player that, he's got everything. I said to him, ability-wise, you can go and play in the conference, but his mindset and the way he is, he's got in his own way, and that's the biggest thing.
No, it's quite difficult. Obviously, is this a player in your first team?
Yeah, so he's been with us now for 2 years, and it's one of them where he's got everything, but it's just his mindset, and it's one of them, isn't it? It's like I always say to them, give me hard work over talent, because give me character over talent, because you see so many players that have got all the ability, make it to the top, get the car, get the house, get the name back of the shirt, get everybody telling them how great they are, and then you don't hear about them in 2 or 3 years' time. They don't fulfil that potential because your character can put you in a position, your ability can put you in a position that your character can't handle. So what happens is, if you don't work on your characteristics and your personality, then be careful what you wish for. So, example of this is Ravel Morrison. Sir Alex Ferguson says Ravel Morrison at Man United was one of technically the best players he's ever seen. And then to see him, he went on loan to Lazio. I mean, like
Guadalajara as well,
and other teams, and it's like it's just evidence that not too much too soon. But if you haven't built the characteristics to be able to handle, a certain stage that you're on at a certain level, then it doesn't matter how much ability you've got, you ain't going to sustain it.
No, absolutely. Another quote that I sort of resonates with me is, in terms of the hard work, if you play for the badge on the front, then people will remember the name on the back.
Yeah, I love that.
Which is it's brilliant.
It's a brilliant quote, and that's absolutely right. And you look at Phil Neville, no disrespect, but you look at the likes of Phil Neville, Thomas Gravesen. I mean, Thomas Gravesen played for Real Madrid.
Yeah.
Savage. There's so many players, and they are technically gifted. They're brilliant, I'm sure. You John O'Shea's, but they did that. They played for the badge, and they maximise their full potential. And so people look up to the people who's naturally gifted, naturally talented, the easy on the eye. But not enough credit goes to those players that maximise their full potential. I played against Mesut Ozil for Arsenal. And after the game, speaking to Steve Bold, the manager's Big Howie spoke to Steve Bold and Arsene Wenger after the game, and they were speaking about how, if you told Mesut Ozil he wasn't playing on Friday night, he'd go out, and saying that he's a nightmare because he's just got this God-given talent that he can just turn it on when he wants. Yeah. But what that does is it don't allow him to work hard, because he knows that he's got that ability just at his expense. So it's really about, you can always improve. Michael Jordan talks about it. Every athlete in their sport talks about how you can always improve, and you just see certain people that are comfortable and happy. And Mesut Ozil is another one where I still see him and I just think, gosh, there's more in you. But of course, his ability just relies on himself.
I've heard different things about him, and obviously he's played at Real Madrid, the highest, and he was one of the better players in the team. But some players have come out in interviews and gone, he's a quality player, don't get me wrong, he's better than I'll ever be, but I've gone in for a header with him and he's bottled it. And it's like, you haven't got the obviously the other
it's
things that
like
would make you the best.
The desire. Yeah. I mean, if you look at Cristiano Ronaldo, got the flair, got easy on the eye, but he will put in his head where it hurts. He gets himself into the 6-yard box. He heads. He competes. He don't mind a tackle. He don't mind the physical side. So that is the difference with Ozil, putting him in that bracket of the minority. And I was speaking to Thierry Henry leading up to the Arsenal game as well. I sat and had 2 hours with him, and he was talking about the invincible season when 49 games unbeaten. And during that season, there was 3 or 4-0 up at half time, and him and Patrick Vieira were pinning each other up against the wall because they had a dispute about something in the first half. And he's just saying how they had such a winning mentality that that's what made them successful, because they cared, they had that hunger, desire, that fire. And you look back at that Arsenal team, to the difference between that Arsenal team and this one is that they competed. They put the foot in. they tackled, they all had that fire. Patrick Vieira, Tony Adams, Keown, not necessarily technically better than Mustafi and all these players, Arsenal now, but what they did have, they had this like resilience about them, and that mentality, and that's what Thierry Henry talked about, what made that team so great.
Now that you've spoken about that, what was it like talking to Thierry Henry? Obviously, an amazing player, and again another player that's gone on to do amazing things, obviously at Barcelona as well. And that's another player. The difference, obviously, when he was at AS Monaco, he's come over to Arsenal, and he's had a couple of games, and people have gone, "Who's this kid?" And then the next thing, he's like, "What? Like, this player's amazing."
Yeah, well, growing up, I mean, there was the Brazilian Ronaldo, who I admired, and Andy Cole, Dwight York, their famous partnership.
Ballers.
Obviously, the Premier League players, and little Janino at Middlesbrough, could name loads, and that's sort of how I fell in love with football. But then Thierry Henry came, and Arsene Wenger, and then it was like this new brand of football. And it was a stage when I was a teenager, and I was like, gosh, this guy, like, if I had just an ounce of his talent, I just loved to watch him. So when I got the opportunity to meet him, you can imagine how excited I was. And so I went down in the car, met him, got out his car with his agent, and only meant to be a 45-minute interview about the leading into the Arsenal game. 2 hours later, he didn't shortchange us one bit. And what I wanted to do is, I'm always intrigued in how people's thought processes. I could ask him what car he drives, or the average question that someone would say, but I wanted to get really deep down underneath the surface as to what made him tick as a player. And so I had these questions like, how did you prepare for games? And just fascinating, really. And one thing that he said, which probably wouldn't sit well with people, and it probably didn't me a few years ago, having before spoke to him, but he said footballers earn every penny. And I was intrigued as to what he meant. And obviously these times footballers getting attacked with paying, with their wages and stuff like that. And I agree, there's not some footballers who do themselves a good service, really, because of obviously stuff that gets printed in the papers. But Thierry Henry said, I can't just nip outside and go to the co-op. I can't just go out and get a chippy. I can't do the normal things that other people do. I have to stay in my flat because I want it to be effective. But of course, when you're effective comes fame. And because I'm famous, I can't do the little small things in life that everybody else can do. So he says, therefore, that making those sacrifices, I know that I earn every penny that I've ever earned. And when you hear that, it's sort of, you start to step into his shoes and think, gosh, like, as much as he is an idol to so many people, and everybody would love to be him, it comes at a price. It's not just he's living the life and he has all this available to him. Yes, materialistic and superficial, but just on a human being level, these things that are just everyday, day-to-day normality for us, he can't actually taste or do. So that was interesting. And then he was just saying how he prepared for games and how he never went for meals with the team. He always stayed in and he was studying the next opponent and watching. Wow. He had that hunger and stuff, and you could just tell why he went on to be as successful as he was.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there any players that you obviously you weren't in their era of football, but you look back and go, yeah, I'd love to know more about that player? Mine's Ian Wright. People idolise this guy, and I want to know more about him because he's obviously from a working class background and he's got an amazing story.
Yeah, interesting. Never really been asked that question. Probably Paul Gascoigne, I think, because the work that I do and the thought processes, I'd probably just, you look at him, he was probably the pin-up boy of English football at one point. He was, in terms of he had everything. If he was Brazilian, he'd get in their team. Despite his issues. And so what happens is with with this country, unfortunately, is that we can sort of, go into big tournaments and then on the back of the paper, we want to shoot people down and sort of, instead of elevating them and just holding the space for them to go. And, in Brazil, they're like build statues and they're legends, and, and I just love for us to give them a little bit of a break, really. Absolutely. And I think Gaza was probably, it was self-destruct, of course, but maybe the pressures and the media of playing at the top and that expectation maybe led into some mental health issues, which then led to his addiction of alcohol and gambling and all that other stuff. So I think I would love to have connected the dots going backwards to a time where he was at his peak, and then talk to him about, what was going on, because he had everything, and he was somebody that I've always been intrigued to get to know what happened. I look at his life now and I'm thinking, gosh, he ended up being bankrupt. He ended up with this addiction. He's lost his family numerous times. I've read his book, and it was like, gosh, I'd love to know who he was before all of this.
I found, I obviously watched a thing about Paul Gascoigne as well, and the stuff the guy's been through is phenomenal. But the more current player, like you say with England, Dele Alli was playing for Milton Keynes Dons at one point, and then next minute he's playing against Iceland. And the thing I've got in my head is like, football can rise you up as much as it can drop you down as quick as possible. And
yeah, absolutely.
I'd love to know what goes through like the Dele Alli's daily life and stuff, because he's sort of shot right up, and then little things. People, obviously with fans and stuff, people are really quick to jump on any mistake a player makes, and he's just a really interesting
and you look at Dele Alli. There's a lot. I mean, Sancho. It'd be interesting in Sancho's progress over the next couple of years. Again, if he's Spanish or if he's Brazilian, he's straight in there. He's the golden boy. Yeah. And Dele Alli was that. He was like, we could have used Dele Alli as like our main man. Come through, his rise was brewing. He started to play regularly. He started to actually find an absolutely fantastic level of football. And you're right. And it's almost, we have this expectation as a nation. Probably going back to when we won it in 1966, where we had this expectation that we're going to every tournament. And probably the last 5 years, we've probably been a bit more realistic, and that expectation's come down. Hence why we did so well in the last tournament.
Absolutely.
But that is for any young player, and it's difficult as well with the foreign managers and the foreign players coming through. For any young English player breaking through, like Phil Foden, Guardiola speaks highly of him, but he's not playing first team football right now because he's got world class players ahead of him. If he was at any other team, he'd be their star man, So it is difficult for an English player coming through.
Obviously, with like other players as well. One doesn't come off the top of my head, but loads of players, like say a Harry Maguire. Instantly, he's played for Sheffield United. Obviously, he went to Leicester. He's had a brilliant couple of years, and then the next thing, 80 million is spent on him, and it's like there's so much like riding on him going to Man United, and it's like this guy's not. This is just personally. Obviously, I don't know Harry Maguire, but there's so much riding on him going to Man United, and he's probably not dealt with such a pressure before.
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse, because the amount of money that's in the game, comes with that expectation. If you've got a price tag, if you come, like you say, 80 million, there's that expectation straight away. You have one bad game, you get hammered by the fans. Yeah. Social media now is blowing up, so. It's one of them where, is it the player's fault that he's on that much money? Yeah, no. The money's floating about. If, would a footballer then go into a normal workplace and start hammering someone that they're not doing their job properly, But then they can sit in the stands, and because they've paid to get in, they can then have their opinion. No. It's really difficult. I really struggled the back end of my career with football and the politics side and sort of everything that came with it, because I was quite fragile. obviously going through my personal issues off the pitch and sort of then having to deal with certain things. I don't like it when we get told to be thick-skinned, really, because it's almost like, well, because we get paid that, the players get paid a certain amount of money, that they can just take all this abuse. You know, they're human beings at the end of the day. And although they may be put on this persona and this act of like they're untouched, you know, and it doesn't bother them, I can tell you from experience, when you go home and the shouting dies down and it quietens and you're by yourself, I can guarantee it lands. So it's really hard for me to see players take abuse, and some are thick-skinned and some have just conditioned themselves for it and well-equipped, but it doesn't make it okay. And I think that back end of my career, that's something that I didn't miss, is how you had to put on this mask and you had to just take it because you're a player and just learn to take it and be thick-skinned. And you know, try and educate people and fans, supporters, that, you know, they are only human beings. I mean, look at Caroline Flack, for example. You know, she took all that abuse, and you just never know what's really going on with people. And I think more and more footballers are coming out with it now, and other people are coming out more different walks of life, is because, you know, social media is such a way where somebody on his sofa, you know, can have an opinion and have a voice that is so powerful, you know, and words are powerful, despite who's projecting it. Social media gives people a platform to then project stuff towards people and attack people, and it can have a profound effect on people. And obviously, we've seen the likes of Gary Speed in the past, you know, other players. So I think that's what I'm big on, is just, you know, trying not to have this perception of footballers should be thick-skinned. You know, it's about educating people, and if the game can change slightly to that and actually humanise it a little bit, you know, fantastic.
Absolutely.
Just experience a game of football from eye level. Okay, because when you're sat in the stands, it's a completely different view. The beautiful thing about the FA Cup is it gives you an opportunity to play at that level, and you know, we defeated quite a lot of higher opposition teams in the cup, and I love what I do. It comes at a cost, because you can imagine the amount of people, when I go and help them, the amount of energy it takes, because I'm an empath as well, so I take on a lot of emotions because I feel their pain.